So today we're going to be looking at Sully Part 2. And the announcement is that we will be transferring everything over to a Thursday. So it means that I can get my life back. So we're going to be looking at the at Sully, history, legends, myths, and a few ghosts tonight. Those that don't know where Sully is, if we haven't visited there before, I will point it out on this wonderful map. Ellen is with us tonight, the architect of making sure that we have maps in every single lecture. Maps of this, maps of that, but now we know where everything is. So there is Sully. As some of you are aware, a few years ago, there was a controversy with the name Sully. It was originally called Sully, and the Welsh underneath was D Sully. And somebody said that was silly. So they've actually called it Silly. So apparently that's the Welsh name, when in fact there could be lots of names for Sully. And in fact, that's completely wrong, because the original Welsh name for Sully is actually not known. But what we are going to do today is a few little bits and pieces, a little bit of medieval, a little bit of ghosts, a little bit of trees, and a little bit of this and that. So I think we could actually do a Sully part 3, but unfortunately, because we'll be changing this evening to something else. So we've got a couple of Sully lectures left, and that will be it. So Sully itself is a rather interesting place because it's seen extensive changes. And when we're talking about extensive changes, it's seen extensive changes in the topography, the landscape. So the coastline of Sully at one point, if I may erase that line, was something more, if we want to sort of look at the landscape, the landscape was something like this, going in a little bit like that and out. And the other interesting thing is that then the coastline would come all the way out here, and then the coastline would go inland like this. So in fact, that was the original coastline. In fact, Sully was on a peninsula at one point, because all of this here, so if we change that into blue, we get a little bit of arrow. The sea used to come in all the way more or less to here. And what we do know, Sully at one point had a harbour here, and actually had probably another harbour here as well. So the landscape has very much changed over the past 2,000 years. And there's been talk, and it's been discussed only by a few, but there may have actually been a canal that actually linked Sully with the River Ely. And the reason why that's been suggested is that the stone that was used to construct the fort at Cardiff actually came from a little harbour which is here, and also came from along the coastline. And the only way this could be moved suitably was actually something like this, because it'd be very difficult to move stone up along the coast with the types of currents, all the way then up into open water, all the way back along. So the stones must have got to Cardiff somehow, and it's likely that there may have been a canal link between this area of the landscape, Sully, and actually the River Ely. So that's food for thought. So I thought that there could be so much I could have done tonight. And when I started looking into it, I thought, am I going to do the lime kilns of Sully? And I thought no, which is a bit of a shame, because there are lots of different things I wanted to get through. So to try and keep it succinct, so we actually all learn something. We're not scathing over things. Let's sort of have a look at this map from 1915. And a few things have actually changed since 1915. And the two main things that have changed since 1915 is actually, so we get this out here, is that there's no longer an active railway going through Sully, which some say is an absolute crime, because that would deal with congestion into Cardiff, but that's politics. And another thing that's massively changed is that Sully itself has expanded hugely. So Sully itself, there's houses occupying all this land now, all of this land. There's houses which are being planned all the way across the landscape today, and there's lots of houses running across here as well. And this is a thing, you see. Housing has actually taken over the landscape. It's a village that's expanded massively. And one thing that people don't really seem to know about Sully is that not only is this itself all reclaimed land, but actually, if you go over toward Barry Island, Nels Point was actually Sully Island at one stage, before this little island over here was actually called Sully Island. So I made that, and I said that in the last video, actually. And another interesting thing I didn't actually mention last time was the date 1899. Why is that date 1899 interesting and important to the lecture today? Well, if any of you have actually got hold of my book, Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan, you shall know that I write about a chap known as John Story. So I've got my book in front of me, Romans in the Vale of Glamorgan, and John Story, an archaeologist, who was actually the founder of the museum in Cardiff, which eventually became the National Museum of Wales. John Story was wandering around Sully. You can picture the scene now. He was wandering around Sully, looking for mushrooms, as you do. And whilst he's looking for mushrooms, apparently he found the remains of a set of human remains on the moors at Sully. And to be honest with you, I've been trying to find out where these human remains may have been found, but they weren't found in the middle, because they couldn't have been found in the middle because that was all underwater. So it's likely that the human remains was probably found around here somewhere. And apparently there was some other objects found as well, like a copper bowl. Leading into the story in 1899 as well, he was told in a local hostelry that some coins had been found at the exact spot that the human remains had been found at. Whether this story is this way or that, in fact, nobody knows the true story. And it turned out that that hundreds, over 300 coins were actually in a coin hoard associated with this set of human remains, or they may have been associated with something else. Over 300 coins were found. And this chap, John Story, traced these coins all the way up through to Liverpool, because the navvies who were digging a ditch across the landscape found these coins. However this is linked with the sets of human remains, I don't really know, but there were all these coins, and he tracked these coins all the way up through to Liverpool. And he got all these coins together, and they ended up in display in the Cardiff Museum. But I'm very suspicious over that find. And a few years later as well, in about, I think it was about 2007 or something like that, 2 other coin hoards were actually found in this sort of common area. And these coin hoards all dated to around the 300, like the coin hoard found in 1899 was dating to about the 300s. It's an indication that there's possibly substantial Roman remains to be found in Sully somewhere, because up here at a place known as Hopkins Mount, we do know of Roman remains, and actually in a field which is a little bit, I think, if I can remember right, the field is this one. Yeah, there it is. In 2005, Roman remains were also found in that field. And the reason why we know that Roman remains were found in that field is because Archaeology Cymru was some of the first people to actually make the Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monuments aware that there was a set of Roman remains in that field, because we found loads of pottery. But again, that's another story. So this railway line is really interesting, and we will look a little bit at this railway line. We'll look at the Sully train station. But when I've actually given walks in Sully, what we do is we walk through the estate and we sort of trace bits of the railway all the way through, and then we go all the way up to here. There's little bits of the railway left, but it's mainly in people's gardens, and people have just taken bits of the old railway, and that's basically it, really. So the old Sully Railway could never ever be rebuilt. It could ever be reconstructed, because most of it is now being built on, which is a great shame. So what I wanted to do was actually to clear up a little bit of the story that I left us with last time. So as you can see, this you know, it's planned that they're going to build houses within these fields here. So this will mean that Sully is a huge village without the facilities to keep it. Obviously, it's got a nice school, it's got a couple of shops, but it's going to be really big. And you can't see it, but on here there is actually a set of medieval remains in the field, and we're going to actually look at this as well, which is marked the Sully Brook. So that's where we're going to go. And there's the church. And if you one key thing about the landscape is that this area here is all being reclaimed. And if anyone's ever going to Cardiff on the train, the train line is a little bit further up here. If anyone ever goes to Cardiff on the train from Barry, it's times that the water floods the fields either side of the railway track. It's really weird. That you're almost as if you're going through water. Obviously you're not, because the railway embankment is way up out of the water, but it's just like really weird. And that's a sign as well that this entire site at high tide was completely inundated by the sea over 300 years ago. And it's actually just a few things to cover to clear that up. This is a site of a huge military base. So this was all a huge military base at one point. But it's all directly built on a huge concrete platform, because underneath it there's culverts and there's streams and there's water courses flooding underneath, and so on and so on. And this landscape is all completely altered. It really has. It's a very, very different world today, but you can get little glimpse of it, of what the past was like in the winter months. I want us to actually, so if we quickly, the place where we're going to go, sort of show you where, so you're not completely disorientated. If we go back a bit, where we're going to go is actually here. We're going to go into this field. So the next plan that we will actually see as we look is actually there we are. And what I'm going to mention is that it's really difficult to make out. But here is a medieval site. You can just about see the bank around the outside. And what this medieval site was it was a bit of a rectangular platform, and it's known as Middleton Moat, and it goes something like that. And it's a rather interesting structure, because it's sort of on the moor, and it's sort of it's, you know, it could be prone to flooding. And if anyone ever gets the opportunity, it's really overgrown. But if anyone ever gets the opportunity, and they go down this road, which is Ashby Road, directly in a person's garden is a wonderful built sort of very late medieval, coming into the early 15, 16, 1700s, is actually a beautiful lime kiln. It's probably not as early as that, but it's a beautiful lime kiln. And you can actually just about see it from the road. It's great. And here, that's where the railway station used to be, because up here is actually where the train track is. And across the whole moor, in the summer months, because you have actually got a right of way to go across the field. And I'll show you where the right of way is now. So there's a stile by there, and the right of way is basically directly across the field. And you are sort of drawn this way, but you should actually go this way and then follow the brook along, and you actually meet a stile. The farmer doesn't like people going across his field, but it's tough because there is a public right of way going across there, so that's fine. And something else which is really interesting is actually there's a little alignment along here, and I'm told that there was a little railway track here once, and this little railway track went to something that we're going to actually look at now. And yes, we will mention a couple of ghosts because we do actually go to the captain's wife tonight. But I do have a little bit of a story here which we're going to go on to. So if you bear with me a moment, that's what we're going to do. And this little story is maybe associated with this little bit by here, because over 200 years ago, this was the shoreline going all the way through, and it's raised up. And one thing, there's actually what seems to be a little bit of a stone structure, like a quay. It's a really nice stone built quay, or it could actually be a bridge, but it's a quay. And I got a little story associated with that, and it comes from the 1700s, and it said that there was a lady that was here in the 1700s called Aunt Cinna, Mordrib Cinna. This was a cunning woman. We all know what a cunning woman is. It's a witch. It was a cunning woman, and she sold the winds and weather to sailors. Now, we hear a lot of this being, if you go to the museum in Boscastle, it tells of selling the wind to sailors. And what you would do, you would get a bit of rope, and you would tie a knot in it, and a sailor might give you a penny for that knot. And then if you have 2 knots, then it's 2 pennies, 3 knots, 3 pennies, or whatever. And basically, what would happen as you're out at sea, if the sailor wanted fair wind or foul wind, they would undo one of the knots, and apparently that's called selling the wind. And the sailors would visit this lady, this Mordrib, Aunt Cinna, and they would visit her, and she would be really famous, and she would sell the wind. And apparently this is something that actually worked. It's known all the way up and down the coastline, selling the wind. And I wouldn't dismiss it at all. And you might think it's a load of mumbo jumbo, but when you're on a sailing vessel out at sea, the only thing that you've got to rely upon is faith. If you've got storms, the only thing you've got to rely upon is faith. So if you've got a bit of a string with knots on it, that's a lot more than having no faith. So that's an interesting story. And there's another character associated with Barry. He's called Uncle David, and he's known as Ether Dewi, Uncle David. He lived on Barry Island. He sold the wind as well. And there was also Bill of Breakwater, Neil Charleston. He sold the wind as well. So these are really nice stories, and it's associated with that spot actually. And I think that's a powerful story, really. Anyway, what else is also interesting about this point is that years and years ago, I used to give a regular walk in Sully. And sometimes they were popular, other times they weren't. And what made these walks unpopular was the fact that I would take groups of people along this footpath where I had a right to take them. And I would show them these localities. And anyway, long story short. And one thing that I used to show them was not just the bridge. I'd actually, sorry, I've just muted you, Amy. I actually used to show them these trees. Now, these trees are really, really interesting. And why they're really, really interesting is that they actually formed a wonderful orchard which went all the way over here, and it was formed by trees going all the way here. It was a wonderful orchard. And it all, so there's fruit trees there, but there was willow trees there as well. And one very little known fact is that they used to export willow out of Sully to be used as cricket bats. Sully was renowned for its cricket bat making, and these cricket bats were exported all the way around Britain from Sully itself. And this is where the willow trees are still there. So, you know, if people are bowled over, then they're being bowled over using cricket bats from Sully itself. Also, Sully is known for its wicker baskets as well. So I used to love taking people down here, and I used to say, this is an important point. But the farmer didn't like us taking people down there, so we stopped. And also, it got to the point that we'd been chased by cows in the field, so that didn't help. So anyway, so that's that little bit of the story. But there is a footpath near, so you do have a right to wander across it. So the other intriguing thing across here, so we've just been there on the Sully Brook, this bit here, and obviously this is all going to be open water at high tide. So this here, what they've done over the years, two things. They've raised the ground level. So I will tell you how they've done that. All this landscape used to be the Barry dumping ground. This used to be the Barry tip. They used to dump rubbish across here. This used to be the tip. You know, thousands of tons of rubbish was dumped across here. And when they were creating the chemical works, and when they were actually digging out the docks much earlier, this is where all the crap was dumped as well. So this is how they built up the level. The level here is built up out of waste, actually. But they needed these drainage reams. So that's a drainage ream there. There was another one there as well. And the drainage reams themselves are actually crossed by strange little bridges. Hang on, get rid of that. It's crossed by strange little bridges, and if you can see it, there's a nice little bridge going across here. And I'm not sure if it's this one or one a little bit further up. There's a big limestone slab going across it. It's really intriguing. It's really interesting. And what we would do on going off the footpath, we would not only visit, we would visit this here, and there would be bits of ruins over here as well. Not sure what date they were from, but there was bits of stone wall over there as well. Moving on. You lot have been wonderfully quiet. John's being wonderfully quiet as well. It's great. Just a reminder as well that this Middleton moat thing here, you can see it on Cobb Line, and there it is. We don't really know much about that, but it's in a very strange place. I actually think it's probably a bit later, actually, being that this landscape would be quite easily flooded. Now, this itself is... So what I'm going to do, I don't want to put the two alongside each other. That there is the old Sully train station. So what I'm going to do, it would be best if you can look at this now, and I will explain the buildings that we're looking at. I think that's the best way, right? So so if we move a bit further into this, oh, all right, we just right, here we go. So the buildings that we're actually looking at are that building there, the one in the middle, is actually these buildings here. Yeah, and these buildings here are actually these buildings, but the train tunnel there is actually still intact. And that train tunnel is actually at the back of this garden. If you're very nice to the people at the back of this garden, so that's where the train tunnel is. It's all blocked up now, but you can see it in the garden. It's great. And what used to happen is that the train used to flow all the way across there, and used to then link up with this bank. Sorry, I've used the wrong color. Let's use pink. So it used to run all the way across here like this, and then it would used to go all the way at the railway embankment, which is actually still there for everybody to see. And actually, a few little strange things is that in this garden, there was actually an old guards wagon. It's in ruinous state, but it's a wonderful guards wagon. And actually dumped a little bit further on is actually one of the guards stoves. Is a guard stove, because each guard wagon had a stove so they could heat up, make a cup of tea and coffee, right? And that's dumped there as well, which is great. But we were invited into this woman's garden this one day, and she had a complete collection of buttons. And I mentioned this last time. There was Great Western Railway buttons. There was Taff Railway buttons. There was BR buttons, which actually means Barry Railway buttons. And she had all these buttons. It was great to see them. And they were actually all dumped there because they were all dumped in this bit, because all this here, if you look, if we go back again, if we get rid of them, if you can see that there, that is where they dumped everything in this bit. So this big hollow in the ground, which is these are actually the workmen's cottages for the railway, and these are actually still standing, but everything else is absolutely completely gone, except for the railway tunnel. And the story, I just tell you this now quickly. It's almost as if, like Cowbridge, the people of Sully wanted to get rid of their railway just like that. So when the railway closed in spring 1968, it was almost as if they were demolishing it and ripping it down as soon as it closed. It was all ripped down. It's almost as if people wanted to seize bits of the railway before anyone changed their mind. It was all ripped up. It was all ripped up within 2 years. Within 2 years, it was history. Except this itself is one of the worst decisions of beaching, because this would have been a brilliant archery now to connect people in Sully. This would have been brilliant, but we can only look at the past, and we can look at past mistakes. And the other thing as well is, if you look in all the stuff dumped down here, you see little bits of this, little bits of all of this, loads of stuff just dumped in there all together. It would make a brilliant archaeological excavation, but I don't think that people would somehow like that. I do like the people of Sully, but some people don't like their railway past. It's become clear to me over the years. And just sort of zooming in a little bit into this. And if we have we might need a little break, because but maybe not. We'll soon see. Right. So if you look at this screen as well, they've done loads of efforts. They've built these drainage ditches in the field, sort of going like this. The grid form drainage ditches, you can actually just basically see them. So draining the landscape has been a continual thing for quite some time, actually. And moving on. And I mentioned what you can see is, if you look at the plan as well, to get an idea of the railway, you can actually see that alignment. That is where that's where the cutting was, and that's basically the boundary. So that's all you've got left in that area. But it makes a good walk when you're actually taking people out there to actually show this is this, and this is the wonderful past of this really nice landscape. And that's what it used to look like. A lot of people, a lot of holiday makers. And this is from the Frith collection, as you can see that there. So Frith has copyright on this one, but it's an interesting. This is a very interesting image, and this is when Sully used to be a very, very popular location, actually, because people used to then walk to the coastline, and there was a nice little stony beach there, and it was quite pleasant for people, actually. But this all went. And again, we do these lectures, and if everything I looked at and I said that's a shame it's gone, it'd be really depressing. But it's a shame this has gone, really, because it's missed. And that almost looks like yesterday. It really does. That's a really pristine image, and thank you to whoever took this. This is obviously before 1968, and it might actually be 1968. And around the landscape as well, going up to the road, which is Cog Road, which is the main road at the back of the village itself. You do see these occasional posts, and that there is looking all the way over to, that is the chemical works over there. This leads then over to, then it goes all the way up to Wenvo, and that's where the McDonald's is today. So the McDonald's in Barry going all the way, there's a cutting going on to Wenvo. We actually made a video about the Wenvo tunnel a few weeks back, which was fun. So there's something I wanted to show you here. And I'm not going to ask if you can spot it, because that's really unfair. So what we've got is we've got the railway over here, and we've got the church sort of this way. And this is then going over to Cog Farm, which is quite an interesting farm. It's what's called a model farm, which is further up the road, which we don't look at today. But what is on here is actually, can't zoom in. What is on here, you can't see it, but if you look by where that blue car is, I actually think that's my car. When I last visited this, there's actually a circular thing here, and that is a mill. A mill from the 1800s. Rather interesting, that. And what I've done, I've taken the opportunity to actually hang on a minute. Yeah, I am recording this, John. It's just not showing on your screen. Yeah, we do record these things because they do go out. So that there is that. You can see that. So if you go back in, you can clearly see the circle there. And it's a very strange thing to actually have the remains of a mill in someone's garden. It's very strange. And but you can park up and just peer into the garden. They don't mind. They're okay at this end of the village. Now, what this says is as follows. I've taken the cov line thing out. This is basically all that's on it. Situated in the garden of a modern house are the remains of the manorial windmill of Sully. Now, it says manorial windmill, but I don't find anything earlier than the 1800s associated with this. Only the base survives, built of random limestone rubble with sandy mortar and standing to just over 2 meters in height. The circular tower is 5.8 meters in external diameter, so that's wall to wall across, rather interesting, with walls 1.3 meters thick. Strongly battered on the outside, it is entered by opposing doorways. So it's got two doorways, which makes sense. And the doorways are about just over a meter wide, as it says. A millstone now rests against its inside wall on the west side, which if you can sort of glimpse that, you're lucky. A windmill is shown on the Admiralty chart. Now, the Admiral charts are really interesting maps, actually, because the Admiralty charts from across the landscape actually show lots of really interesting sites along the coastline. I first learned about how long the mill had actually been in the Millwood down at Monknash at Blaenau Cwm from an Admiralty chart from 1839. The Admiralty chart mentions this mill as well from 1839 as well. So there's a bit of a link there. So windmill is shown on a historical Admiralty chart, and so was presumably used for coastal pilotage. This edition of the Admiralty chart was first published in 1839 and continued in use until 1864. The survey used to compile the chart was undertaken in 1832. So we know it was there then. It was still standing. It was being used back then, probably. And I don't think it dates to before 1814 from what I actually know. One thing that Amy's actually put on here.
No.
All right, then I won't put that on there, Amy. Amy, we'll discuss that at the end. Amy, you shivered when you said that. So anyway, so that's the mill, but this is not that mill. So we've got the mill there. So this is not that mill. There's another mill associated with Sully as well, and that's a mill which is down the road known as Hayes Mill. And this is a rather interesting mill because up until about 30 years ago, all the cog wheels were still in it. And that's the mill hub itself. But unfortunately, I think the mill wheels, the wooden mill wheels and everything else has now been nicked. It was supposed to be protected. So this mill itself is there. So as you come out of Sully, you go all the way down this road and you drive all the way through. And then on the right, you can actually see the mill itself. So there's another mill. So Sully, the place with two mills. And so these were actually still inside with all the wooden stuff. But I do believe that somebody's actually set light to them since and it's all gone. They were supposed to be protected, but unfortunately, that's the way of the world. So that's that building there. It's completely overgrown now. It's really badly overgrown. There's ivy all the way up it, trees growing out of it. It's in a really bad state, which is really important, which is really sad, really. And the criticism goes with British Petroleum, who was supposed to be protecting this site. And they obviously didn't do a good job of it. So what I would like to do is I'd like to look at the captain's wife, and then we're going to call it a day. So the captain's wife itself is, for those that don't know where the captain's wife is, so as you're coming out of Sully, and you're going then towards Penarth, and you've got the only bit that's not built on the right. If you go down to the caravan park, there's something known as the captain's wife. And there she is. Now, captain's wife was famous, I think, at the beginning of the year, something to do with birds and dovecotes being blocked up and so on, but that's all been sorted out now. And the captain's wife has got a few nice little ghost stories. So let's sort of do them. So, if we sit by the fire, here we go. So it's known as the captain's wife because the wife of a captain is meant to frequent the bar area. She's a dark shadow and she walks away in a disorientated fashion. She walks through the bar doors and walks at length through the lounge, and hence some say why she's called the captain's wife. There's actually a couple of stories associated with the captain's wife. That's a nice succinct little story. And when we actually read into this, one, it goes that there's an individual, a male individual, that's said to roam the bar area. It's quite a big open bar area, actually. Anyway, wanders the bar area. And apparently he's got windswept hair, so he could very much be like me. And he wanders around. He's about 40 years old, this chap, endlessly wandering around this sort of the captain's wife. And actually, the captain's wife wasn't always a pub. It was a house. And then it's also said as well that there's a young boy who's meant to be heard wandering upstairs. And I actually come across lots of you actually come across lots of young children sort of upstairs in buildings. I don't know why. There's another one associated with a plough and harrow. There's another one associated with Dunraven House, when that was still standing. So almost as these youngsters like to wander around upstairs. And this youngster is meant to be about 4 or 5 years old, and he's occasionally heard and seen. And then the final one here is that there's a second young boy who's seen by the chimney area. And why is he seen by the chimney area? It was because he actually got himself lodged up the chimney because he was trying to escape his violent dad. And it's said, to spite his own son, his dad lit a fire underneath the chimney that day, and his son was smoked to death. And that's associated with the chimney area. I don't know if this is this chimney, but apparently his son got lodged in the fireplace, and he was smoked to death like a kipper. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it there tonight. I'm going to wonder if there are any questions. So everyone put their mics on, and John, you can unmute. Unmute, John. Right, Ellen, have you got any questions?
Sorry, I was just doing hedgehog food. No, but I will watch the video after the bit I've missed.
All right, Dad, don't worry about doing hedgehog food. It's fine.
I've just done it.
Well, it's a bit late now, isn't it? Because the lecture's nearly over.
I know, sorry, but only the little bit at the end I missed.
All right, don't worry about it. Amy, anything you would like to say?
Yeah, actually, the mill.
Your mic's really bad, Amy.
Mill now.
Amy, your mic is... Go on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go for it quickly.
The mill. Is that like all ruined now?
Yeah, it is all ruined, but in the 1970s, the mill tower was still intact, and it had all the gear mechanisms, all the wooden gear mechanisms, and everything still in it. It was absolutely in a perfect state of preservation, and BP were actually meant to protect it. Now BP have had a lot of taxpayers' money over the years to be in Barry and all the rest of it, and they were responsible for the upkeep, and they've done an absolutely terrible job of doing so. So yeah, we've lost a wonderful monument there, and it's completely overgrown.
Okay.
So, which is a big shame. And John, you've got the last word tonight.
Oh, what can I say? Yeah, all good stuff. That captain's wife place, I have been there in my previous car, and it's a big place, as you were so rightly say. The Roman bits and pieces around Sully, and I suppose the medieval, I may well need to make a point of paying a visit to, but yeah, and I must say I'm very impressed with my new video. I haven't tried the headphones yet. I'm thinking of sending them back because they're not wise.
John, you're making a mistake. John, you're making a mistake because there's a way of sorting it out. I made the same mistake. If you go to your audio settings, right?
Yeah.
If you go to it says if you go to your mute button, there's an arrow. It goes to your audio settings. When it goes select microphone and select speaker, you need to press the one same as speak system, and it will work perfectly.
Right. Okay.
Right. So if there's no other questions, I will be
no. You did a good job, lad. I'm very pleased with you.
Thank you very much, John. You are so patronising. Right, Ellen, I will see you, Ellen, on Wednesday night and hopefully Thursday. And Amy, I will see you on Friday. And John, I will see you on Tuesday evening.
Yes. Ellen, tell me about these hedgehogs before we all go.
Oh, there's just the ones in the garden. So I just put their food out. The wind's...
All right. You're not doing rescue work then, as such.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, basically, Ellen's had enough of them being in the house, and she's thought of putting them in a garden where they can also eat slugs. So there you go.
Well, you can bring them over here to eat some slugs and snails. We've got plenty of them.
Get some duck.
But funnily enough, I opened the patio door a month ago, and just to make sure I'd locked the car up, etc. And oh my God, there was this hedgehog sat out there. He frightened me to death. I jumped. I even yelled. I thought, oh, John, why are you doing this? You're used to wildlife. You should be getting overexcited like this. But yeah, I was shocked mainly because I never expected really to see an hedgehog near to where I live. I didn't think they even existed, but yeah, they do.
On that note, John, let's call it a night.
Me and Ellen are having a sensible conversation.
Well, okay. If you and Ellen want to have a conversation, right? I'm gonna. Hang on. Let me finish, and then you two can talk, right?
Right.
And then you can talk as much as you like. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I'm gonna go over to Michelle and give her a great big cuddle, and you two can talk the night away. Before that, I will see you on Friday, Amy, and best of luck to the chickens. And Ellen, I will speak to you soon. And John, have a nice conversation about the hedgehogs, and I'm gonna leave you two to talk.
Jambo bueno.
Night, folks. Bye.
Night, Carl. Bye.
Night, Amy. Night.